Hi, my name is Owen Fine, and today I'm going to be showing you my slideshow about improving ethnic and racial relations within the police force. Without further ado, let's get right into it. The overview for this slideshow, I will be defining race and ethnicity and explaining why it's a sensitive topic in society and how they were socially constructed and how they became to what they are today in America. I will also explain why the police force is very biased and racially discriminating against black people, but also just non-white people in general. In addition to that, I will also talk about how that affects the prison system, the effects of the prison system on black people in America and on the economy, and just how it affects people in everyday life. I'll also be talking about slavery, the history of slavery, and how that connects to the police force today, how that connects to the racial bias within the police force today, and how it all connects together. I'll also provide solutions that I think can make a difference to these problems, so let's get straight into it. Defining race and ethnicity, I define race as a social construct used to group people together. Race was not always an idea in our society. When the colonizers came in the 1600s, specifically 1619, to Jamestown in America, their goal was to take the land for themselves and, gain more land, gain more power. But there's these people that had a different skin tone than them that were there, and just automatically the Europeans saw them as inferior because they're trying to defend their own land, or they're standing in the Europeans' way of getting the land, which led to really the earliest form of racism I can think of. Just finding someone inferior based on their skin tone. That's almost the definition of racism. So that's the first idea of race. And ethnicity is the quality, characteristic of belonging with a certain group of people that are from the same descent or follow the same cultures, celebrate the same cultures, So, for example, ethnicity could have always been an idea and could have always been a thing in the history of the world or the history of people. It just wasn't defined yet. But people always were in their own groups. People had religious groups. People had, different tribes in the Native America. People had different states, different countries, different rulers. There's all kinds of different groups of different people that all come from the same place or all celebrate the same things that can be used to describe ethnicity. So I would say that ethnicity has been an idea for longer, but both, as we know today, are ideas in America, and both are very important. History of the police. So the police force were not always the police force. Back when slavery was starting, back in around the 1600s, after the America was colonized by Europe, the transatlantic slave trade delivered slaves to all kinds of countries, but specifically America. And once those slaves were in place, they needed people to kind of watch over them and stop them from rebelling. So those people were referred to as the Slave Patrol. There's a picture of them in the bottom right of the screen. They have the little uniform, hat, and gun, just like a police officer would today. So that is where the first influence of the police force originated. And the Slave Patrol enforced their rules all throughout slavery. And the rules were to stop black slaves from rebelling and basically just torture them like any slave master would. So enforcing Jim Crow laws, enforcing local racist laws. And in the 1900s, after racism was officially abolished in 1865, there were more like local police forces that were enforcing local laws. So that was really the start of the new and improved, I say improved with sarcasm, but new and improved police force as we know it today. Now, there is a ton of racial bias within the police force. Everyone knows it. There's a stigma around it. There has been for years, over 10 years at least, and honestly, way longer than that. Unarmed black people die every year to police. 75 of those cops being white that shoot unarmed black men or women. So there's clearly a trend of white cops killing black people, and even more specifically, unarmed black people. So it's definitely an issue, and it's definitely something that you don't want to continue. No one, white or black, should lose their life if they're innocent, and the fact that you never hear stories of innocent white people losing their lives, it shows that it just doesn't happen, and it's not a story because it doesn't happen. So there's some sort of racial bias against black people within the police force, and it's an issue. It's definitely an issue. For example, 5 out of every 100 white people get arrested. 13 out of every 100 black people get arrested. Now, it doesn't seem like that many less, but when you factor in that white people have a huge population advantage over black people, it's pretty shocking to hear those numbers. Now, a couple of solutions to racial bias within the force. I think that it's hard to come up with a perfect solution because so many people have tried over and over and it's almost never worked. But one potential way to prevent or help prevent racial bias within the police force is to have more black and Hispanic people within the force. One of the biggest reasons non-white people are so mistreated by the cops is because most of the cops are white. I think with more and more non-white cops, I think the level of mistreatment and the number of people being mistreated is bound to go down the more and more people. And although there are already many, they have racist partners, racist bosses. It takes more than one to stop an army. So, one other solution, defunding the police. There also obviously has to be another sort of group helping people, or else the world would be chaos. But defunding the organization and the people that kill innocent people, innocent black people every year so many times does not deserve to be funded. History of discrimination towards black prisoners has a lot to do with police bias and bias against black people. Black slaves, black prisoners, always been treated poorly since the Atlantic slave trade. They were treated as slaves, tortured on the boat, barely fed, hydrated, forced to go to the bathroom on top of each other, just terrible conditions. Lynch mobs in the late 1800s killed and tortured over 2,000 black people just for their entertainment. Example, Emmett Till, you see in the bottom right, was one of those people, 14 years old, and he was abducted, tortured, and lynched for whistling at a girl. So that shows you just the kind of hate people have for innocent black men. So while there is a history of mistreatment towards black prisoners, the system that black prisoners have to face is also very unfair and biased against them. While many black people get arrested, while many black people do not have the money for top tier lawyers, it creates a huge trend of, entitled white people that commit crimes having top tier lawyers because they have the money and getting off scot-free for crimes they committed, while these innocent black kids, black men, black women being wrongly convicted of crimes because they don't have a good lawyer to prove themselves, to prove their case, because they're not allowed to have one because of the situation and the bias in the community around them. Ex-criminals are 50% less likely to get a job, while The ones that do get jobs make 30% less money per year. And take that into account, and you remember how many of the people being arrested are black compared to white. It just shows. You wonder why black people tend to be poor more than white people are. This is part of the reason why. Solutions to fix the prison system. Never a perfect solution, but one solution I can think of is new practices and routines for policemen and women. I think that can make a huge way. It could go a long way for black people and prisoners that get mistreated. Having thorough searches, making sure you have the right person, everyone being on the same page. And with the addition of more non-white people in the system, they're going to make sure that they don't arrest innocent black people or innocent Hispanic people. You know, it's just once the first dominoes fall, the rest should also start falling. Also, a system for everyone to get a fair shot of a lawyer. Earlier, the stat that 48% of private lawyers get cases dropped, while only 11% of public defenders get cases dropped. It shows that if you have the money for a private top-tier lawyer, you are at an advantage, while most black people and non-white people do not have that luxury and do not get to have that advantage. So everyone should get a fair shot. Everyone should have a fair chance to have a good lawyer, because that's what they deserve. Now, history of slavery. This is the origin of the mistreatment of black people, the origin of racial discrimination, the origin of it all. Slavery, 1619, European colonies came on ships to America. They wanted to control the land and anyone with it, and essentially looked at all the people that lived there as inferior life forms. They used their weapons and their sheer numbers and armies to kidnap them and torture them and enslave them if they didn't cooperate, and also potentially kill them. So, early stages of slavery, as well as the transatlantic slave trade, also helped get that going. Sent slaves to America, got sent to work on plantations, and from then, just more and more kept coming. Now, the impact of slavery on America, very clear, but to the police force, they definitely had an impact. So after slavery ended, local police forces were made to enforce the same laws during slavery. They just couldn't be as obvious about it since slavery was officially abolished. The perception of black people did not change. It was already very bad, and it just arguably got worse once slavery was abolished, because everyone just saw them as slaves. White people that even weren't necessarily racist just saw them as slaves because that's all they knew them as, due to the people before them turning them into slaves. So black people still felt oppressed, and that feeling has not changed today. Black people are still oppressed, and they still feel oppressed every day. Now, some solutions and ways to help prevent racism. Like I said for the previous two solution slides, there's never ever going to be a perfect solution, or else someone would have figured it out by now. But there are always ways to help and spread the word and inform. So I definitely think one way to prevent racism is to educate people and help spread the word and tell your friends. And a lot of racist people, they don't have their own beliefs. They believe what someone told them. They believe what their parents told them to believe, but there's so many influences in a kid's life and a person's life that you never really know what someone believes. So educating someone on the history of the mistreatment of black people and the history of slavery and the history of the police force, and giving them the facts, giving them the stats, and showing them why black people deserve to be treated better. You never know, it could turn a light bulb on in their head. They could realize that this is all wrong. They could realize that treating other human beings like crap for no reason is pretty stupid. Another way is to fight racism is joining movements, speaking out. Be loud with your voice. It's one of the biggest ones. One thing you can always do is speak up and have a voice. You will always have a voice. Whether or not it's heard, up for debate. But as black people, we don't get to be lucky. We aren't lucky. We don't get to have our voices heard when we say anything. We have to earn the right to have our voices heard. So one of the biggest movements there is Black Lives Matter. I'm sure most of you guys know Black Lives Matter. Originated in 2012, I believe. Just a movement to speak out against racism, police brutality, any racial discrimination. Anyone against racism is welcome in the Black Lives Matter community. All you have to do is speak up, speak out, speak your mind. And that is one way to fight against racism. Just spread the word. Keep spreading. Now, to conclude, the police force in America, heavily biased and impacts everyone on a daily basis. Impacts me and you on a daily basis. Me being an interracial person, I have brown skin still. I'm half white, half black, brown skin. The police don't know what I am. They see me as brown. So, I have to be in fear of being pulled over for no reason. I have to fear every time a cop passes me. So that's just a personal way that I can relate to this, and a personal way that I'm affected. I don't even have it as close to as bad as other people, so it just shows that everyone is affected by this somehow or some way, and there are so many people that you might not think are affected, but are definitely affected by racism, racial discrimination in America. And there are underlying causes and previous causes of racism and examples of how racism started, and you can see and understand why racism stayed, because just the country was dominated by white people for so long. But there's no excuse for it nowadays. Racism should not be an issue. Human beings should all be treated equally regardless, and hopefully one day that does happen. And specifically within the police force, I hope people can just get their help and not be scared of the cops and actually want to call the cops for help. So thank you for listening to my presentation. I know it was very lengthy, but I hopefully I presented you some useful information. Hopefully I helped you clear your mind on some things, and hopefully you enjoyed the presentation. Thank you for listening, and have a good one.